Greetings and welcome everyone to Retro Game Repairman, where we learn to get vintage video games to run on modern hardware. I'm your host Ace, and today's game is definitely something a bit different. Specifically, Ring from 1998, aka Ring the Legend of the Nibelungen. First released all the way back in 1998, and based off of a Wagner opera, Ring was a commercial success at the time, but is generally not actually considered a good game, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, Ring the Legend of the Nibelungen is more typically considered these days to be a game that falls into the category of being so bad it's good, thanks to the many absurd elements within it. So with this in mind, it's understandable why there might be at least some people willing to try this game out. And so it is unfortunate that this game has issues with modern hardware. Fortunately, we are of course here to fix that today. Of course, with all of that said, I should first mention that I am testing these fixes out on the 4CD version, which is important to note because there are at least 3 different versions of the game. The 4CD version, which is the North American version, the original 6CD version, and finally a DVD version. In addition, it's worth noting that these fixes are being tested on a Windows 10 64-bit, with 48GB of DDR4 RAM, a GTX 980 Ti, and an i7-6700K processor. And with all of this said, let's dive in. Now, the first hurdle you're going to see is potentially installing the game, as the installer may believe that you don't actually have enough free space on your hard drive. If this happens to you, it's because ironically you have way too much space on your hard drive. Fortunately, there is a workaround, which is to install the game on a drive that has less than 2GB of free space. And note, I do mean free space and not total space. In my case, I simply plugged in an 8GB thumb drive and then filled it most of the way with copies of old video files I had lying around, allowing me to install the game onto that thumb drive and then copying those game files and pasting them into the drive I actually wanted the game on. But once this is done, it's time to move on to the next step, which is to download and extract DigiVoodoo 2, after which you want to go into the DigiVoodoo 2 directory, then into the MS folder, and then the x86 folder, and copy the files shown here, and then paste them into the games directory, at which point you'll then want to open up DigiVoodoo 2 and configure as shown here. So now you should be able to run your game and actually make it look nicer, at least in theory, than it did at launch. That said, we now need to move on to another fix to allow you to save while in game. And for that, what you'll need to do is download this folder and paste it into the data folder of the games directory, overwriting files when prompt. It is worth noting that while this will allow you to save in-game, it does have a few quirks to it. Basically, when you try to save, you will be getting an error. However, you simply exit out of there and try to load up using one of the existing save files that you copied and pasted in, and instead, you'll be loaded into the save that you tried to create. So it's still a buggy system, but at least now you can actually save while in-game. With that said, there is one final thing I do need to bring up. This game has a Windows XP patch. Unfortunately, it is extremely difficult to find, and the only version I could find online was the 6CD version. And I'm not even sure how useful the Windows XP patch is for that version. That said, I will be providing a link to a copy of it, so you can at least test it out for yourself and see if it actually makes your experience better, assuming you have the 6CD version. Congratulations! If you have done everything correctly, then your copy of Ring, the Legend of the Nibelungen, should be fully playable, and you should be able to save. That said, there are a few quirks that do need to be mentioned. First of all, it is worth noting that the game can have issues when loading cutscenes from the CD, meaning that you might have some stuttering with cutscenes on a first playthrough, or in some extreme cases, the audio cutting out. Fortunately, this is something that gets solved during a second playthrough. That said, it is still not exactly ideal. The second issue worth bringing up is that the game does not like recording software, or at least some recording software, and will refuse to run if you try to use said software. This This may explain why some YouTubers such as Mandalore Gaming had such a tough time with this particular game. Fortunately, it is not a problem that would affect most people, but if you do plan on recording footage from this game, it would appear that using a program such as OBS Studio would be your best bet. With all of that said, I do of course hope that this guide will be of use to you, and I also of course hope to be back again soon with another video. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.